got a proper drinking habit. This thing drinks like a V8. Not just petrol as well, it drinks oil, of course. Hello there, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to part 2 of me working on the RX8. Now, I have got exhaust, wheels, really important things to do today, but before I get to that, I thought I'd start with a few minor things I've done on the interior which may be of interest to RX8 owners out there. First thing is I fitted this little Bluetooth cigarette lighter. Very common thing, you can get these on Amazon, eBay. This particular one is a Lucent. I think it was about £15 off Amazon, but the reason I've got that is because there's no Apple CarPlay, there's no way to connect a cell phone up to the standard head unit. I mean, you can get adapters. It means you have to remove the head unit and you have to run wires, etc. I can't be bothered with all of that. All I really want to do is get my phone on a suction cup on the windscreen and have it charging and playing music. So the easiest way is to get one of these things. What they do, if I just put the ignition to on.
Bluetooth mode. Wait for connection. Bluetooth connection success.
Okay, so it's instantly Bluetoothed to my iPhone. And as you can see here, it's actually broadcasting on 888. That's the FM frequency. So if you set your radio to 888, you can actually play all your music and your Google Maps instructions straight through the radio, which is very cool. So that was a nice easy mod. Of course, as it's got a USB power cable as well, I can charge my phone as I'm going, so it's not going to go flat. Fantastic. So that's mod number 1. Mod number 2, which I think personally is essential for any RX8 owner, is to have a ultra gauge. I was playing with this yesterday, so it's probably I've probably upset it. There we go. Now it's turning on. Right, so this is a little computer which plugs in to the factory OBD. Is there? I can just feel where it is. Yeah, there we go. It's there. And I'll just run the cable through the dashboard like this to the ultra gauge. And what you'll see is straight away it's displaying engine temperature, intake temperature, catalytic converter temperature, battery volts, the AFR, and something else called UGC. I haven't quite figured out what temperature reading that is yet, but this can basically, especially on a track day, this can save your engine, because not only can you get instant readings, but you can set alarms. So I've got it set so that if the engine temperature gets above 120 degrees, it just starts beeping at me, so that I know to take it easy, to back off a little bit and let it cool down. Now, as far as I'm aware, the only thing that this can't show you is the oil temperature, but that's fine, because over here I have a separate little autometer oil temperature gauge. It's not supposed to be flashing. If you can see it flashing on the video, then that's just because the frame rate of the refresh of the LED bulb inside doesn't actually flash. To the human eye, it's a constant illumination. That also has a warning light in the bottom right hand corner, and if it gets too hot, that will actually light up. So it's good to have things to tell you when stuff's going wrong, especially if you're going to do track days, etc. Now, the final modification, and this is a bit visual and personalization really, is nobody really likes the stock gear knob. Let's be honest. So let's get rid of that now. Ed was kind enough to give me a very nice S2000 style smooth gear knob, which would be much more pleasing to the hand. So let's get that off, just a case of spinning it till it comes loose. And then got the shiny new one, which I will just put on now. There we go. Oh, that's much better. Yeah, much prefer that. Well, I prefer that at the moment. It's very cold. It's been in the armrest all night, but I do worry that if the car's been sat in sunlight all day, this might be like a hot iron when I go to grab it, and it may actually burn all the skin off my hand. So I'm going to keep the old leather gear knob in there just in case I want to change my mind. So now we move on to wheels, and behind me here I've got a couple of the original factory RX8 wheels. And at this point, it's probably a good idea if I explain to you why I bought the RX8, what my intentions are for it. Well, I actually want to learn how to drift.
hold on, I hear you say. You already have a supercharged GT86. Why not just use that to teach yourself with? Well, that's an expensive car to write off if it all goes wrong during the learning process. Also, even though you can easily drift with a flappy paddle auto, there are techniques such as clutch kicking, which for obvious reasons you can't do unless you've got a manual. It's like doing your driving test in auto. Yes, an auto license does the job, and it's probably all you're going to need these days, but better to do the manual test if you can, so that you can learn the complete skill set. Why not just take drift lessons from a professional, I hear you say? Well, that's exactly what I did. I've already had a few professional lessons in MX-5s and IS200s, but the problem is I found that you have to first get used to somebody else's car, and then just as you're starting to get the hang of the lesson, it's all over. Drift lessons are also quite expensive. A full day tutoring can easily be the best part of £1,000. So I decided best and cheapest option would be to learn in your own car. So that's what I did. I bought the RX8 off Ed, fixed it up, got it back on the road. But why did I choose the RX8 for drifting? So I've been looking at lots and lots of cheap rear-wheel drive cars with LSDs and manual gearboxes. Initially, I was thinking about a Mark III MX-5 or a Lexus IS250. But even a good example would need some further money to be spent on it if I'm going to be using it for drifting. Compared to those other cars, the RX8 has more power, it's already on coilovers, braided oil lines, high flow cat, oil pressure gauge, uprated coils, sparks, leads, etc, etc. It was a no-brainer. Especially as this isn't my first rotary rodeo. I actually had a very nice example RX8 before I bought my GT86. Actually, Ed and I both bought our first RX8s on the very same day. So when it comes to RX8s, I have some history and some knowledge of the subject. But when it comes to drifting, I'm a total novice. I really don't know what I'm doing beyond what I've already picked up from the drifting lessons that I've had. So I'm totally expecting there are going to be challenges along the way. And I'm undoubtedly going to make mistakes, but they say getting stuff wrong is the best way to learn. Now, to help me learn, what I want to do is I want to have the front end of the car really sticky so that I don't get any understeer through the corners and it will actually go in the direction that I steer. But on the back, I want tyres that are going to be really slidey just to make the initial learning to drift nice and easy. I know there are going to be lots of people in the comments here that are going to be saying, well, to drift you need grip at the back as well. Yes, I know you definitely do. But for me, as a novice, I just want to get the feeling of controlling the car going sideways. So the way I'm thinking is make sure the back end's very loose, and then I'll just learn as we go. And then as I get the hang of it, I can swap out the poor non-grippy rear tyres for some actual grippy ones like the front. So for the front, I've gone for these Cormoran UHP tyres. They're a very sticky compound. These are actually made by Michelin. They're one of their sub-brands. And you can get these exact same tyres as Cormoran, Raikkonen or Taurus, I think, in some countries. Those are actually very good value for money. Now, on the back, I've gone for the good old Accelera PHIs. These tyres are absolute rubbish. If you just look at any of the tyre reviews or the websites, people describe these as death traps. But for me, for what I want to do, I want to have minimal grip on the back so that I can get used to the sensation of the RX8 going sideways. And then we'll build on from there. They'll get to a point where I'm very confident of handling the RX8 going sideways and I want to up the speed. For that, I'm going to need to swap out these for probably something like these, so I've got grip all the way around. But let's get cracking. So while I'm here, I'm going to show you a quick tip for putting on the rubber gloves that you should really be wearing when you're working on a car. Protect your hand and get all those nasty chemicals that can cause cancer. Now, sometimes I find that it's very hard to get a rubber glove on, especially if your fingers are sweaty, damp. However, tip that I found, if you actually fill the rubber glove with water, fill it up like a water balloon, it makes it so much easier for you to actually slide all of your fingers all the way into each hole. And then all you do at the end, you raise your hand, let all the water slide out. Job's a good one. So the car currently has some ultralights that Ed fitted with some Hankook Ventus Evo 2 tyres. Now there's nothing particularly wrong with these, it's just that they don't quite have the same rolling radius as the original 18s, and also
the suspension needs raising. As I mentioned in the last video, it's far too firm and it's not able to go over speed bumps without grounding out. So we're going to take off the wheel and we're going to adjust the height of the suspension first. So wheel chock at the front, and I'm going to jack up the car from diff. Okay, with the wheel off, you can now see the teen coilovers, and you've got these two circular locking rings, and you need a special tool like this to undo them. So I'm going to start by undoing the bottom ring, and once they're loose, once the two rings are apart, I can then raise the suspension up a little bit. Okay, so I've got it off the jack, and yeah, that sits pretty well on the stock wheels. Let's take the tape measure to it. Actually, we've still got only about a 2 centimetre gap. Well, that kind of makes sense, because even though I've raised the suspension, the actual rolling radius of these wheels and tyres are actually much bigger than the ones that Ed put on. So these are 17-inch with a 245 profile of a 17, and these are 18s with the 245 profile of an 18. So technically, the distance between the bottom of the tyre and the top of the tyre is further than that wheel and tyre. So even though I've raised the suspension, I've put technically a taller tyre in there now, so that's kind of soaked up what I've added in the spring height. So I'm quite happy with that, actually. I think I'm going to leave that. I'm going to do all of the corners just like that, and then if I need any more height in the future, I can just wind up a tiny little bit more. Okay, so the car's back on the stock wheels, and to as close as what I think I can get stock suspension height. But we get it out on the road, let it settle, and we see what it looks like later. So now that the wheels and the suspension are all sorted on that, the next thing to do is the exhaust. And this is actually a factory exhaust. I got this off eBay from a nice chap who owns an RX7, and he sold this to me for 30 quid, absolute bargain. The back pipe is a little bit surface rusty, but it's solid, no holes or anything. This actually came off of a 192 RX8, but Ed assures me that the exhausts are exactly the same, whether you've got the lower powered 192 or if you've got the full fat 231 like I have. So let's get that fitted. Now, safety first, always remember if you're working underneath the car to put some axle stands, just in case for some bizarre reason your jack gives up the ghost. So I've put a couple just below the subframe on both sides, and in order to remove this exhaust, looks like an eBay one to me, I'm going to start by undoing this section here. You've got something similar on the stock exhaust, but it's more of a sleeve type with a banjo around it, but I don't need to disconnect that. This is actually quite a light system, so I'm going to make as little work for myself as possible. Remember, lefty loosey, righty tighty. Always do up the nuts and bolts like this so that you don't lose any washers or any nuts. So with that now disconnected, all I need to do is undo these exhaust hangers. There's one on each side. There's 4 in total, but this aftermarket exhaust only uses 1. Now, Ed has a special tool for removing these. I don't, so I just use GT85, which is a cheap version of WD-40. And by soaking those in, they should slide out without much of a fuss. Tight in there. That's the aftermarket exhaust out. I'm now taking a bit of lubricant and a wire brush to the back of the catalytic converter flange, just to get rid of all of the exhaust glue they've put on. They've put a load of gun gum on and stuff, just to make sure the surface is as clean as possible. Just a bit more spray to wash away all the dirt. Okay, now we put on a new gasket. One of these things, the big metal donut, and that just fits over the edge like that. And you need that for the stock exhaust system. You might find it's easier to put the front bolts in first. That's actually what I should have done. So with the exhaust out of the way, the next job is to replace out the factory rubber clutch hose with a nice shiny braided one. I'm using one from Hell, and this wasn't too much money off of eBay. Benefits of this is that the clutch will now feel a lot more direct, and you'll have a lot more feedback as to what the clutch is doing, which is just going to improve the drivability. I will warn you though, this job was not fun to do. Basically, you've got to be under the transmission tunnel and you've got to get a hand up the left side of the gearbox. That's the passenger side in the UK, driver's side if you're in left-hand drive markets. Once you've basically disconnected the bottom end of it, you can then connect the new pipe to the top end, which is behind the intake manifold. Again, not a lot of room for your hands here, and you can reconnect the system and you can go around bleeding it. So, more problems, unfortunately. The old misfire that Ed was facing with the eccentric shaft sensor, that's come back. So I got 2 months out of that used Denso one that he gave me. So I've had to go back to Mazda and buy a brand new one, which was nearly £300. Just to let you know that the official, genuine Mazda sensor is also a Denso part. So if you're going to need to buy one of these, try to find a supplier for the Denso part. You can then skip Mazda's markup on this, because I'm sure you're going to get it a lot cheaper than 300 quid. The other thing that I noticed is that the MAF sensor was quite filthy. So I got some MAF cleaning spray, gave it a good clean down so I can pop that back in. And while I'm there, seeing as I've got to remove the airbox to get to the eccentric shaft sensor anyway, I got myself a Blitz panel filter. Just dropped straight into the factory airbox. Hopefully improve the breathing a little bit. Got this from Fensport, it's about 80 quid. So yeah, let's get cracking. Oh, it makes such a lovely noise now. Now that I've gone back to a factory exhaust, it's not deafeningly loud, and also I'm not turning heads for the wrong reason when I'm driving about in it. So yeah, great, really happy. Can't wait to get this out on track and to start trying to teach myself to drift in this thing. Like I said, I've had some lessons which were great. The only problem is, after a day's worth of lessons, I only kind of really felt that I was sinking into it and getting the idea towards the end of the day. So hopefully with my own drift car I can do as many laps as I want, and I can take my time and learn to drift as best I can. I might totally suck at it, but we'll see. It's a cool car. It's got a great chassis, great engine, loads and loads of revs. You can really put it through corners. Sticks like it's on rails. Just makes such a nice noise. The car encourages you to drive it quite hard, but then that's good, because they say for these rotary engines, a red line a day keeps the rebuild away. You need to give these things a good old poke once a day, and that'll keep them from carving up inside. And I think that's probably about that for this video. So thanks again for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Please like, subscribe, the usual business. And next video, we'll see you on track at Anglesey. Bye for now.